Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Angel Padilla, and welcome to Indivisible's Facebook Live. We're here today to talk about a few things. The main one, though, the main event is immigration. We want to talk about folks about the really important immigration stuff that's developing. I'm going to quickly go through introductions, and then we'll just dive in. We're going to have some time at the end for question and answer. We got a ton of questions all over the country, and we look forward to answering some of these. So my name is Angel Padilla. I'm the policy director for Indivisible. I worked for Congressman Gutierrez for 2 years, back in 2009, 2011, where I did healthcare policy for immigrants, and saw the rise of the Tea Party. And so now it's really great to see the rise of this progressive left movement that's doing things like stopping the ACA, which is still on the table. So we got to keep fighting to make sure that we are defending our communities. And I'll turn it over to Isaías.
Hi everybody, my name is Isaías Guerrero and I am an organizer for the Fair Immigration Reform Movement, which is a campaign with the Center for Community Change. I'm very excited to be here with you guys and to share a little bit about May 1st, which is a very exciting moment in this a moment of resistance where all of our communities are going to be coming out, are going to be sharing our message of justice, of dignity for all, not only immigrants, but all people that care about democracy. So I'm very excited to be here with you all. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ignacia Rodriguez from the National Immigration Law Center. NILC is one of the leading organizations that really focuses on advancing and defending the rights of low-income immigrants. And I come to this work from a very personal place. I myself was undocumented for 19 years. Throughout my time in college, I felt very empowered being part of the immigrant rights movement. And so I've made it a mission of mine to make sure that I can support the new generation.
Great. And so before we jump into the big immigration things that we want to talk about, I want to give folks just a basic policy update on things that are happening on the Hill in Congress. As many of you have probably heard, the zombie bill is back. Republicans are trying to bring back a vote, and we're hearing rumors that they could have a vote as early as tomorrow or Saturday. This is super important. The ACA is once again at risk. They want to bring it back. They don't have the votes. They don't have the votes to repeal it, but they're trying really hard to get them. They're trying to twist as many arms as they can, so it's super important for you all to go out and make sure that you're telling your members of Congress that you don't want them wasting any more time repealing the ACA, trying to repeal the ACA. We've already killed it once, a month and a half ago. They tried to do it and they couldn't. They didn't have the votes then, and they don't have the votes now, but you have to keep up the pressure to make sure that they don't get those votes. The other thing coming up tomorrow is a short-term continuing resolution. And if you don't know what that is, go to our website. We have a document there that explains what a continuing resolution is. Basically, they need to fund the government. If they don't fund it by tomorrow, we get a shutdown. So they're under pressure to pass something to fund the government. So those are the two big things right now. Make sure that you're talking to your members, making sure that you're asking them no more time on ACA. We want to keep the ACA. Okay, so why are we talking about immigration? It's actually really simple. On November 9th, I think the people that we were most worried about, there were two things that I think we worried about on November 9th of last year. The first one was, what's going to happen with the ACA? They're going to repeal the ACA. The second one is, what is the community most under threat with Donald Trump in the White House? And it was very clear that it was going to be immigrants. Immigrants are the most vulnerable community under Donald Trump. And that's why at Indivisible, we believe that an attack on one is an attack on all. And so that's why we believe that we need to stand up for immigrants, and we want to be supportive as much as we can for immigrants and immigrant families. We recently released a toolkit on how you can be an immigrant ally, and it includes information about what you can do locally to connect with immigrant rights groups, to make sure that you're making the right ask, you're communicating with the right people, the place where you're going to get the most helpful information is from those groups at the local level. So check out our toolkit. It has information about what you can do as an ally. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Isaías to talk about the big May 1st marches that are happening this Monday.
Sweet, thank you, Angel. Yeah, so as Angel was saying, in November 9th, we've seen a big wave of attacks to the immigrant community that have been tearing up the social fabric of our communities. The executive order on internal enforcement, what it's doing is expanding the definition of who is a criminal. And so what we're seeing now in FIRM, which is a coalition of 44 organizations, is that Immigration, Customs and Enforcement is continuing in the abuse of its power when it comes to do raids or ICE sweeps, as they call it, and they're picking up everybody who they can proof that is undocumented. That doesn't matter if they have been here for a long time, if they're paying taxes, if they're contributing members to the society. And so it's so important now more than ever for us to be able to stand up this Monday and be able to tell this administration that we are not going to allow for our communities to continue being torn apart. And so we're very excited because from our network and from a national coalition of organizations, we're seeing 100 national partners that are coming out and saying, we support immigrants and we support democracy. And so on May 1st, we have over 250 events all across the US in 200 cities in 39 states. And so if you don't have an event that you're connected, we encourage you to go to our website, is riseupmay1.org. That's riseupmay1.org. You can find events there and connect with one of our affiliates. Our main message is really one, that we're not going to allow this administration to continue its enforcement methods. And second, that we don't want any of the funding to go to the border wall and also to the deportation force. Because what we're seeing is that the trust that has taken years to build between the immigrant community and law enforcement is being torn apart in just a couple of months that this administration has been in. And so we're going out into the streets, and we're also making sure that our local elected officials support immigrants. And so we're creating a buffer zone of protection in between the attacks that are coming from the federal government and making sure that our localities, that our mayors, our sheriffs, our city councils are truly supporting immigrants. And this means that we don't want immigrants to collaborate with immigration, because this is the quickest way in which we're seeing that immigrants are being arrested and deported, is when you're driving without a license, you get stopped, you get arrested, you get fingerprinted, and then you get ICE to come and take you away from the local jail. And so these are some of the demands that we have. We're really excited to collaborate with Indivisible. We really hope that you can come. It's going to be a beautiful moment of raising up our stories as immigrants, as people in the community that care about democracy. So we hope to see you there in May 1st, going out and supporting immigrant rights and democracy.
Great, thank you. And one of the questions that we get a lot is from our groups is what can we do? What can they do locally to be better about supporting immigrants? Ignacio, can you maybe talk a little bit more about that?
Of course. There's so much you can do to help. First and foremost, there's a lot of great materials out there that really list out what are people's rights if approached by ICE. On our website, nilk.org, you can find some of those materials, which include an explanation of how people actually have the right to remain silent and to ask to speak to an attorney before even engaging with an immigration officer. And so these are the types of materials that we really need to make copies of, spread the word about, share with our neighbors or family or friends. You can also be a lot more proactive if you see ICE somewhere in a certain corner or going to a certain home. If safe to do so, jot down the time, place, location, what was going on, what were they wearing police attire or actual attire that said ICE on it. These small details can really help potentially fight someone's case who gets picked up in such a situation. You can also report a raid. There's actually a national hotline that United We Dream runs, and that's 1-844-363-1423. And so you report the location, the time of the raid, and then they take it from there and can send it out to their networks to warn others and ask them not to go to those intersections. And then also, you can create your own network, right? So like my aunt, she has a group of friends and they just text each other. They're not all undocumented, but the idea is for them to share the word and say where they think there might be ICE presence just in case and just for protection, really. So there's many ways you can help, and we encourage you to get involved.
Great, and I actually have a question about something that we often hear is, when we first got Donald Trump, there was a concern about whether he would get rid of the DACA program, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, a program that offers relief from deportation to those who came here as children. And what we've seen is generally the program is, I know it's always under threat, but some people think that if you have DACA, you're safe. Is that true?
That's a really good question. I mean, DACA does provide protection, right? Once it's granted, you're lawfully present in the United States. But one thing that has changed since Donald Trump came into power is the new enforcement priorities. And so we've seen people who have DACA who now are considered an enforcement priorities under this new, more expansive rubric. And so that's alarming to us. And we've seen cases like Daniela Vargas, Daniel Ramirez, Juan Manuel, to name a few, where we really wonder what protection does DACA really offer? And so even though Trump has said he loves these kids, we still don't feel that assurance, right? Because we hear about these cases. And that's why it's important for even those who have DACA to still understand what their rights are if approached by ICE, just in case.
Great. So before we get to the questions, and we have questions here from all over the country, just want to make one last plug. May 1st, Monday, there are events all over the country, and we encourage you all to come out and support immigrants. We have the information on our website. You can go to the firm website and for more information. We also have a toolkit there on what you can do to participate and to be an ally to immigrants. And the most important thing, and I can't stress this enough, the most important thing you can do to be an ally to immigrants is connect with your local immigrant rights organization. They're the ones who know what's going on. They're the ones who can tell you what is the most effective way of being helpful. Great. So I'm going to start off. We have a question here from Bert from California. He asks, how can we ease the language barriers between us and you immigrants? Isaias, can you keep going?
Sure. Yeah, I think that's a very good question, Bert. I think one of the most important aspects when it comes to working with immigrants and on the immigrant rights field is knowing that there's always people that are the bridges in communities, right? So like myself, that I'm bilingual, I understand very well what the undocumented community is going through because I'm undocumented myself. No, there's always people that are able to bridge those worlds. And so I think what this question really brings is the importance of truly not letting immigrants and immigrant-led organizations kind of guide the way in terms of how can allies and immigrants work together. And so the way that we see is creating those spaces where immigrants, non-immigrants can talk about what issues they're facing, because each locality is different and each context is different, and the way that ICE or threats with the police can show up are different. And so to be able to understand who's an ally, even at the local or at the kind of local elected official level, is very important. And what is super important too is that we've seen that when people of faith, when allies are coming out, whether it is in a public way to either stop deportations or to be able to be there at the ICE check-ins, or really to be able to push for different types of legislation, that adds a lot of value. And so the more that we can show the power of the voter, the power of the immigrant, and the power of a community united, the more that we are able to kind of truly start to switch the gears and really show why pro-immigrant policies are important for the community. And so, yeah, I would encourage you to, as Angel said, connect with the local immigration organization. And there you will have a mechanism of translation during meetings, having bilingual meetings if it's needed, hopefully finding the translation equipment also, that many municipal governments sometimes have those. You can just ask them and reserve them. And so that's a good way of starting to build powerful alliances.
Great, thank you. We have another question here from Celia from Pennsylvania. And she asks, how do you explain the importance of protecting the undocumented people to people who see them as breaking the law by entering the country and deserving of deportation? So basically, how do you convince people who might not necessarily be on your side? I can start and people can jump in. I think what we often hear and what we often see are people who their immediate reaction might say, well, they're not here lawfully, so they should be removed. But then they realize that they know people in that situation. They hear about someone in their school, about their son or their daughter's classmate. They're someone that they know from work who's at risk of deportation because they're not here lawfully, and that really changes their mind. The point is that these people are everywhere, right? Undocumented immigrants are everywhere. They're part of our communities. They're part of our families, and really understanding that is what really is going to make the difference. And when we hear stories of people who are getting picked up, detained, and deported, people that we know, and that we have relationships with, that makes a difference. So I would just keep an eye out for those. I mean, we have to look out for each other, and recognizing that we're part of a community is, I think, the first step. Anyone else? Okay, great. And so then we have Aaron from Texas who asks, what are some ways our local Indivisible groups can help connect and better support immigrants? I can start, but I think, Isaias, you can chime in here. Again, I think the most important thing you can do if you want to be an ally to immigrants is connect with your local group. There are immigrant rights groups all over the country, and they're the ones who know what matters in your community. It might be a city policy, it might be a state policy, it might be a federal policy, but it's your local immigrant rights community organizations that know how you can best plug in.
Yeah, and I would just add to that the immigrant rights organizations are very connected with what are the political opportunities of the moment. So, for example, in Texas, we just had SB4, which was a very difficult anti-immigrant bill, anti-sanctuary bill that got approved. And so to be able to join in those opportunities and truly advocate, show up at the State House, make your calls is very important. But also at the local level, there's opportunities where you can join. And so, for example, there are very specific ways in which we can ask our sheriffs to stop collaborating with ICE, because many times sheriffs are the ones that are in charge of the local jails. And so when somebody is picked up, arrested by a criminal charge, as soon as their criminal charge is done, immigration usually comes and picks them up and then takes them to another location, to an immigration detention center. And so to be able to stop that collaboration with ICE at the local level is very important. And then at the state level, we also have very amazing opportunities. California was able to push for a statewide bill that basically declared a sanctuary state. Maryland, sadly, just lost the Trust Act fight at the state level, which would have made it so that Maryland as a state would not collaborate with ICE. And there's other opportunities at the state level where we can also throw in. So there are different ways in which we can collaborate, but I think what is most important is going into your kitchen table, inviting your immigrant family from the neighborhood, and truly establishing the networks that Ignacio was talking about, so that in case of a raid or in case of an opportunity of a piece of legislation to be introduced, we can fight for it together. So I would say first is building relationship, and then from there we can start to change some laws.
Great, thank you. So we got this question a lot from a lot of people all over the country. The question is, I personally know or teach or work with undocumented immigrants who may be at risk. How can I support them? Can I be arrested for doing so? Ignacio, can you take this one?
Of course. So we've actually seen a rise of educators willing to do everything and anything to help their students, which is so refreshing and so wonderful to see. There's actually been the establishment of sanctuary schools, sanctuary campuses, even sanctuary districts. And that can be defined in one of many ways. It can be just that the school's not going to just give information about their students and their families just willingly to ICE, that they're going to actually establish a protocol where, let's say, if ICE comes to the school looking for a particular person, the front desk is trained to then, ask for the warrant, ask to see it, and then maybe take it up with the superintendent or the principal or someone who's identified to be able to really look at the validity of the warrant before handing any information. And some we've seen, go beyond that, and some, really just try to create a safe space where all students, not just undocumented students, feel welcomed, right? Because we've also seen an attack against Muslims, and so the idea is not to help with the registry as well for that community. But quite frankly, we've seen, all over the spectrum, there are teachers out there who say, if you want to get to my students, you have to go through me. But as someone who was in that situation, and as someone who really benefited from an educator who reached out and made me feel worthy when I was really depressed because I didn't know what to do based on my immigration status, and finding that out at such a young age in high school, for me, just having someone who cared, who knew about the issue, who, willingly shared information that he would find on the topic with me, that meant the world to me. So it's really up to you how much you're willing to do, but every little bit counts, and it can really make the difference in someone's life.
Great. So we have one question here from Flor from Indiana, who asks, at what legal risk are sanctuary churches, organizations, businesses under Trump? where are ICE's legal boundaries and when it comes to sanctuaries, and is ICE legally allowed to enter a church, organization, or business which has declared itself a sanctuary? Ignacia, do you want to talk about maybe the sensitive locations?
Yeah, so as far as we know, Angel, the sensitive locations memo is still in place, and this basically discloses that there are certain areas that DHS just has to stay away from. And that includes some of the ones you listed, right? Churches, it includes schools, which we just talked about, among others. And as far as we know, that memo is still in place and still has to be abided by. We've seen the boundaries of it being challenged, right? Like someone not being picked up at a school, being picked up after dropping off their child at a school. But as far as we know, that memo is still in place.
So there are places where immigrants are supposed to be, where ICE is not supposed to operate, and so and those include the places that were named. And so if you see that that's been violated, that they are going to churches or hospitals and clinics, I mean, we need to know that, right? And we need to broadcast that because that's not what they're supposed to be doing. I have here a question from Michelle from California who asks, how do we address local government concerns with their support for becoming a sanctuary city when feds threaten to withhold money for those cities? This is a good question. We get this question a lot, and it's for, there are a lot of cities that are trying to establish welcoming policies for immigrants. And you hear the word sanctuary city a lot. There is no one definition for what sanctuary city is. Basically, a sanctuary city are those municipalities, those cities that have taken up policies that are supposed to be welcoming for immigrants, and it can be a menu of things that includes. It's not just one thing. And what we've seen from Donald Trump is that he's threatened to take away funding to those cities that adopt those welcoming policies. And some of those policies just are common sense policies that make communities safer, right? So things like making sure that immigrants feel comfortable talking to the police is super important for community safety. And that might be one of the policies that cities take up. So luckily, very recently, this week, there was a decision out of San Francisco, Santa Clara, that basically nullified or put a hold on Trump's executive order from January that would have penalized cities that would take up some of these policies. So luckily, what we've seen when Trump has tried to do these kinds of overreaches, we've seen the courts step in to stop him. We don't think that's good enough. We're glad that the courts are stepping in, but really, members of Congress need to do more. Members of Congress need to hear from you to make sure that you don't want Trump's mass deportation force. We don't want funding for ICE agents, for boots on the grounds, for a border wall. They need to hear it. And again, we can't leave it up to the courts. Members of Congress it's their job. They're supposed to check abuses of the president, and that's what they need to do right now. Anyone want to add anything? All right, let me see. We've got only a few minutes here. So Kristen from Georgia asks, is there a way to protest or somehow put pressure on ICE itself to curb these raids? Isais, do you want to?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we're seeing that, in the last 8 years, the immigrant rights movement has employed tactics where when people have come into detention, people in the community have come out and truly kind of uplifted their stories. And what I would say is that the more that immigration feels that they're being watched, the more kind of they start to back off. And so, but also I think what is important to know is that each local office is different and they will act in their own way. So there doesn't seem to be a directive in terms of who or how they will conduct operations. So as we've seen people in the community supporting folks that have been arrested and are in process of deportation and detained, coming out, doing the calls to immigration, showing up at the ICE office or doing a vigil, and truly kind of sustaining a long period of action. We've seen majority of those actions have worked, but not all. And so there has been some folks that have been deported. And I think the most important thing about this type of tactics is making sure, one, that it makes sense with the legal strategy, and two, also that the family is ready to come out and be public, because that can take a lot of toll on people. But I still believe that the more that we're able to highlight how ICE has been unconstitutional, has abuse of their power, and is continuing tearing communities apart, the more that we'll be able to kind of put that buffer zone against that horrible enforcement memo and our communities. So yes, we got to continue the resistance for sure.
Great, and actually this reminds me, there was, we heard of an Indivisible group out of Idaho that I wanted to mention. I think they're from Blaine County in Idaho. They actually just started a rapid response network working with ACLU to make sure that they are monitoring, ICE activities, and they are ready to react if they hear of a raid in a certain place. So those are the kind of things that we need to see groups doing. I mean, this is what we need right now. People are being torn apart, families are being torn apart, and it's up to us to protect those communities. I have one question here from Sandra from Minnesota. Sandra asks, our state legislature seems to be really into preemption laws. To what extent could preemption be another threat to sanctuary cities? Maybe we should start by defining what preemption is for folks who don't know what preemption is.
Yeah, I can do that. So basically, there's just a division, right? So there's certain things that the federal government can do, and there are certain things that are left to the states to be able to do. And that's really what preemption is the idea that there are things that the federal government just has to leave to the states and vice versa.
Yeah, and so the issue here is that whereas the federal government says, our laws trump the state laws, there are some states that are passing laws, anti-immigrant laws, and there's supposedly those laws trump the local laws, the sanctuary city policies. It's a way of trying to attack sanctuary cities at the state level. This varies across the country, right? Every state is different. So the most important thing that you can do is connect to your local immigrant rights organization, because they're going to know what the laws are in your state and what the politics are in your state, and the things that you can do to make sure that sanctuary cities are protected from preemption at the state level. And again, if you want more information on our toolkit, we have ways that you can connect with local immigrant rights groups. We have ways of connecting with the firm groups. We have ways of connecting with United We Dream groups. These are groups all over the country. They want to work with you. They want your support, and they want they really need your help. So if you have time, if you're interested in being an immigrant ally, please go to our website or firm's website, NILC's website for more information. Let's do one more, and then we'll wrap. Let's do, how about this? How can we clarify exactly what constitutes a sanctuary city, and how do we get cities to declare themselves as such? This is actually a good question, because I don't think I did a great job explaining this earlier, but a sanctuary city, there is no one definition of what a sanctuary city is. It's basically a number of options that a city can take that are intended to protect, that are intended to be welcoming to immigrants, and that can be things like, not asking for an immigration status their law enforcement agencies don't ask for immigration status, or something as simple as like not rolling out the red carpet for ICE when ICE tries to enter a community. Those are things that can be considered sanctuary policies. There is no one definition. The point is trying to establish policies that are welcoming to immigrants. I think we're at time, so I think we should wrap, but just want to do one last plug. May 1st, rallies, go to Rise Up. Is that the website, Rise Up?
Yeah, Rise Up May 1.
RiseUpMay1.org.
Yes.
For more information, there's going to be events all over the country. Go to the Indivisible website. We have the toolkit on what you can do to join on May 1st and what you can do just to be an ally to immigrants. Thank you to Isaias from Firm and CCC.
Thank you.
And Ignacia from National Immigration Law Center for joining us today. Good night, everyone.
Good night.